Why were we created? What is our purpose? We have to believe it was for more than just filling a gap in the chasm of time. God didn't choose to create all the beauty around us, only to cap it off with generation after generation of purposeless beings. But understanding our purpose can sometimes lead us down the path of fear. We can often feel pressure to figure out God's will for our lives. Make no mistake, God has a plan and a purpose for each one of us. And we can rest assured that He has chosen to actively participate in our lives to see that plan through. The question we must ask is, will we let Him participate, or will we try to do it all alone?
You know, there are many types of dreams. There are probably even this morning that you woke up and you had dreams through the night. But we know that there are daydreams that many tomorrow when you go to work, you're going to dream about not it being Monday at the workplace. Some of you had these lucid dreams where you can even tell that you know you're dreaming, but you're dreaming that you're dreaming. You know, there's those problem-solving dreams. You go to bed at night and you're working on the problems you left at work that day. Or you left at the dinner table with the family and you start solving them. You know, before technology and smartphones, I used to keep a notepad by the side of my bed because I'd wake up in the middle of the night thinking, I solved it. And I'd write it down. And now we turn on our phones, and which is, I guess research says you're not supposed to do because it wakes you up and then you might as well go to work. Maybe there's just those epic dreams that seem to last for a few nights or a week or a month, that they just keep spreading out, or maybe just flat out nightmares. You just wake up in the sweat and cold. You realize that whatever was there was really terrifying. The reoccurring dreams, maybe even the prophetic dreams, things that have come. Now, I'm sure we've been talking about the story of Daniel, and today we're going to be in chapter 2 of Daniel. But I'm sure Daniel had dreams that we don't know about. I'm sure there were nights that he woke up. I'm sure Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, they had dreams. We don't hear about them at all. We don't hear about those in the first couple chapters. I'm sure that maybe they had dreams of their past, their childhood in Jerusalem. I'm sure they had nightmares about the 900-mile journey from Jerusalem to Babylon as they were being taken hostage. Maybe they had dreams about a preferred future, where they wanted to be, what they wanted to do when they weren't in prison. But their dreams really are not the subject of chapter 2 of Daniel. But Nebuchadnezzar, his dream is. His dream is front and center. Now, why would God want this chapter to be in the Bible? Why would he want that to be in there? Why would that be so important for us? And I believe there's two layers that we're going to talk about today. And the one we're not going to spend a ton of time on, and one that we are. And the first one is there is a prophetic side of the story of Daniel in chapter 2. There's a prophecy that comes out of this. And we'll talk about that just for a few minutes. But there's another side of this, is understanding that the Creator God, who created all of creation, loves His people, and He's active in their life. And we're going to talk about that. But just kind of a refresher, just to make sure we're all on the same page, is Nebuchadnezzar is the king of Babylon, and his country has taken over the southern tribes of Israel, called Judah. And they were living basically in Jerusalem, and he has besieged it. He has taken it, and he has taken certain groups of men and women hostage and bringing them back, and the Jews are going into exile into Babylon. And he begins teaching them and transitioning them into a new way of living, a new culture, new language, new literature, new songs, and he even gives them new names. And it's been 3 years. When it talks in a few minutes, you'll hear that this is a few years down the road. But he was a very aggressive king, Nebuchadnezzar, and he was taking over lands. And so the timeline basically is when he had taken his whole kingdom, and now he's a few years down the road. I mean, their faith is growing. The Hebrew boys and Daniel, their faith is growing. They've survived the onslaught of the initial chaos. Their conviction seems to be there, that they're convictions of faith. But make no doubt about it, they live in the face of fear and death, and it's always lurking. And I think there's this moment in time when we see in chapter 2 that what I call that now what moment. Now what? Now what do I do? Now how do I act? I mean, what happens? I mean, reality of this new life, this new rhythm, and they've entered the king's service. They're there to serve him. They're young. They're without family. There's absolutely zero hope of family. And I mean, they had this great moment with the food in chapter 1 that we talked about last week. I mean, they stood firm in the face of tragedy. But now what? Now what is their life? I mean, Disney does this great job of portraying these fairy tales. And they tell these stories that tragedy happens and everything ends well and everybody lives happily ever after. Now, that feels good, and we can read them, we can watch them, we can rent those movies, not a problem. But this is not a fairy tale. This is real life. These characters, Daniel was a real person that really happened, and Nebuchadnezzar was a really mean, bad dude. And Babylon was mean. And they were tough. And this is real time. So this is a now what? So he has this moment where he stands up over the food and he protects his integrity and he holds to his convictions in the midst of chaos. But now what? He's got the rest of his life to live. There's not a pretty bow on this, and then we skip over to the next character. We've got to live his life. And I think that you and I have now what moments. You and I are probably maybe even living in a now what time. I mean, your world gets completely turned upside down. Maybe you had some unbelievable friends that were really close to you and they decided to move on, maybe out of the area or take on a new job, and they relocate, and that leaves you feeling empty, and it's now what? Or maybe it's when you decide to leave home for the very first time and there's a safety net there and you cut the cord and you take off and you're driving down the road and you don't know how you're going to make it, you don't know where to go, and frankly, you don't even know how to work the microwave. Now what? Now what? Or maybe it's that very first time that you sat at the dinner table and you realize you're eating alone. And that's the first time that's happened. It's just not the way it's supposed to be. So now what? It's not the plan I had. Now what? It's not what I drew up. It's not what I saved for. It's not what I prepared for. It's not what I projected for my preferred future. So now what? And that's where Daniel is. So now what? I mean, we know that life is difficult. We know it's challenging. But why is it so hard to move forward? I mean, he's had this moment, which was great, but now what does he do? And basically, he waits to serve the king. So we're going to be in Daniel chapter 2. If you've got Bibles, open them up, Daniel 2. If you are following along on YouVersion or whatever Bible app you may use on your smart device or tablet, it is there. If not, the passages will be up on the screen. We're going to go through a lot of chapter 2. We're not going to read the whole thing, but we're going to read sections of it. So we're going to be bouncing. So just stay with me. It is Daniel chapter 2, verse 1. In the second year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His mind was troubled, and he could not sleep. So the king summoned the magicians, the enchanters, the sorcerers, the astrologers to tell them what he had dreamed. And when they came in and stood before the king, he said to them, I have had a dream that troubles me, and I want to know what it means. Now, there's what you got to get here is that the translation is not great. It is troubling, but this was an all-out nightmare that was happening consistently as the king was sleeping. It was probably reoccurring. It needed multiple days, and he needed relief because he wasn't getting any rest, and it was troublesome. It was keeping him up, and he needed help. And you know what happens when we get uncomfortable. When we get uncomfortable enough, we tend to seek help or change because we can't fix this on our own. But it takes us being uncomfortable. And this is what happens here. Verse 4. When the astrologers answered the king, they said, may the king live forever, which is wise because he probably would have killed him. Tell your servants the dream and we will interpret it. Pretty bold statement. The king replied to the astrologers, this is what I have firmly decided. If you do not tell me what my dream was and interpret it, I will have you cut into pieces and your houses turned into piles of rubble. But if you tell me the dream and explain it, you will receive from me gifts and rewards and great honor. So tell me the dream and interpret it for me." Now, this was really fascinating to me. That he looks at him and he says, "I'm not going to tell you what I've been dreaming about. If you really are who you say you are, then you're going to be able to tell me what it is." Now, when you're searching for the truth, you don't want to be lied to. When you want to know really the reality of where you're standing, you don't want to be lied to. And Nebuchadnezzar was not different. He wanted the truth. No matter how bad it is, tell me the truth. Don't lie to me. And he may have had suspicion. These boys that are pretending to have power may have been guessing in the past. And so he eliminates that. If you can tell me what I dreamed and you tell me what that means, then I'll take care of you. If you don't, I don't need you. And if I don't need you, you're eating up space here and you're eating my food and you're taking up resources. So I might as well get rid of you. Now, that's an unfair task. In fact, if you skip down to verse 10, which will not be on the screen, the wise men, they said, "It is impossible. It is impossible for us to do this." And they begged the king. They begged him because the demand was unfair. And it was unfair. One of them said this, the astrologer says, "No one can reveal it to the king except the gods." And it's a little g God. No one can do it but the gods. And this is the next part. "And they do not live among humans." So just pause there for a second. He's even saying to them, you need the help of the gods, little g gods, but they don't live among us. They're not with us. See, in the ancient days, they believed in many gods. No one to worship was not a problem. They worshiped everything. Babylon was laced with little g gods. They had no problem with that. The big issue with these gods is, one, they're not real. They're not real. They're make-believe. Therefore, they cannot be active in their life. They were to be feared and revered. They were to be honored. And these gods that they worshiped, these little g gods, they were vindictive. They were manipulators. The stories, the mythologies that went with them were really about honoring them. They didn't care about their subjects. It wasn't like they sacrificed for a creation. They used them for their personal gains, to bolster their positions. They really didn't care. Now, maybe you've heard some of those lies about a capital G God in your life. That maybe people have whispered. Maybe you've had family whisper to you, or maybe the enemy has whispered into your ear. When things aren't going well, he's whispered things like this, that capital G God, either it's too big for him, your problem's too big for him, or he doesn't care about you. See, when we think about that, when we watch that creation video and you see the creation of the world, that we really honestly believe my problems are too big for him. So for many people, you wouldn't say, well, it's too big for him, it's too much for him to handle, not if it was just me, but when you think of the entirety of the whole world, how can God handle that? I mean, you got Africa you're dealing with, you got flooding south of here. That's all big stuff. And so my issues, I'll take care of my stuff. Because if I don't believe he can handle it, then he must not care. Well, if he doesn't care, that seems pretty callous. And I think for most people, we can say, well, I think he cares. So it must just be too big of a job. Because, being God is hard. But those little g gods, they didn't believe in all that. So Nebuchadnezzar is searching for truth, and he needs relief, and he believes that he is a little g God. He believes as the king of Babylon, he is a god. And the audacity for these wise men to say, you can't be taken care of because the gods don't live among us, that was offensive. How dare you? And he goes, basically, you guys aren't who you said. So he calls in the executioner, and he says, gather up all the wise men, magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, astrologers, and annihilate them. Get rid of them. Do as I've ordered. Now, Daniel And the 3 Hebrew boys were not involved in the meeting, but because they had been given gifts of understanding, he said, get rid of them too. I've had it. And he takes them. And the executioner begins in verse 14 to gather them up. And he's going to put everybody to death. Now, Daniel, it says this. This is the actual quote out of the scripture. It says, Daniel, when the executioner came, he said he addressed the executioner with wisdom and tact. With wisdom and tact. Now, Daniel was constantly looking for how to influence his culture. Even when he was facing life and death situation, he was constantly looking, how do I influence culture? He also understood that why plead with the executioner? This guy doesn't get to make the decision if you live or die. This is not the guy. I mean, how many of you have bought a car in the last year and your salesman, when you tried to lowball him, he went, that's a beautiful deal, I'll take it. They don't. They say, I got to go back to the back room. Now, that guy is a meanie and a bully, but I'll go on your behalf. So why plead? You always want to say, I want to talk to the guy that can make the decision. You don't plead with somebody that can't make a decision. I mean, this executioner, for all we know, he may have loved Daniel. He may have hugged Daniel. And he said, yeah, I know it's terrible. You guys are getting robbed. I'm going to have to kill you. Because that's his job. He says, with wisdom and tact. Once again, we're learning something from Daniel. How do we handle people that are living contrary to us? In chapter 1, he gained permission in the cause because he handled them well by treating them with respect. In chapter 2, it says, with wisdom and tact. And he requested FaceTime with the king. I mean, what did he have to lose? So immediately, once the executioner hears the plea, will you at least ask the king if I can have a moment with him? The executioner says, I will go find out, not knowing if the request will be granted. Not knowing if it will be granted. Daniel immediately goes to the 3 boys, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and he goes to them, and this is what he says. Ask for mercy from God. Ask for mercy. Cry out and plead to him. Make the plea to the one that can actually help you. Make the plea to the one that can actually help you. I mean, how many of us have thought, there's no way that this is God's plan for my life? How many times have we thought, there's just no way this is God's plan? That maybe just for a moment, he took his hands off the wheel because there's no way he would have me here. Because there's just no possible good outcome. I mean, how do we pray when our life is on the line? And here's what we can learn from Daniel, that he engaged his friends in the process. He went to his life group. He went to his gathering, his closest, and he said, we got to pray, and we got to pray now. And we got to pray hard. He's teaching us why it's valuable to live in community. Now, verse 18. He urged them, plead for mercy from God of heaven concerning this mystery so that he and his friends might not be executed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. And during the night, the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision. And then Daniel praised the God of heaven and said, praise be to the name of God forever and ever. Wisdom and power are his. He changes times and seasons. He deposes of kings and raises up others. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the discerning. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what lies in darkness, and light dwells with him. I thank and praise you, God of my ancestors. You have given me wisdom and power. You have made known to me what we asked of you. You have made known to us the dream of the king. Now, he didn't pray, now God, fix these circumstances. He didn't pray, now God, if you would give me a cannon, I will shoot my way out of here. He didn't say, God, please send 1,000 angels because I know you can do it, and we're going to fight our way out of this Babylon. He didn't pray, Lord, just get us out. Just remove us. Now, I find that strange because I think that probably, honestly, that's my prayer. Lord, give me the ability to fly because I'm gone. But what he prays for is give me the wisdom to answer the king. He didn't pray to change his circumstances. He prays to answer the question. There's no scripture of screaming, look at me. This was all about the worship. And once he has the answer, he begins to thank God. They have a worship service in the middle of the night, praising God for what he's done. Verse 26, the king asked Daniel, also called Belshazzar, are you able to tell me what I saw in my dream and interpret it? And Daniel replied, no wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner can explain to the king the mystery he has asked about. Frankly, nobody's going to do this. But there is a capital G God in heaven who reveals mysteries. He has shown King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in days to come. Your dream and the visions that pass through your mind as you were lying in bed are these. And so he goes on to explain the dream that nobody else could tell him. He says that Daniel proceeds with this. There's going to be a large statue. You were dreaming about this large statue where the head was made of gold. It was absolutely breathtaking. The chest and arms made of silver. The belly and the thighs were made of bronze. And there was the legs of iron and feet of clay mixed with iron. And there's going to be this rock that was not cut out by human hands that smashes the statue. And the statue disintegrates. It smashes all these other metals. And the wind will blow and all of the pieces will be blown away. And the only thing that will remain is the rock. And Daniel shared that vision with him. And this is what happens next. Verse 38. He goes, in your hands, he has placed all mankind and the beasts of the field and the birds of the air, wherever they live. He's talking to Nebuchadnezzar. He has made you ruler over them all. You are the head of gold. You are the head of gold. After you, another kingdom will rise, inferior to yours. Next, a third kingdom, one of bronze, will rule over the whole earth. Finally, there will be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron. For iron breaks and smashes everything, and as iron breaks things to pieces, so it will crush and break all the others. Just as you saw that the feet and toes were partly baked of clay and partly of iron. So this will be a divided kingdom. Yet it will have some of the strength of iron in it, even as you saw iron mixed with clay. As the toes were partly iron and partly clay, so this kingdom will partly strong and partly brittle. And just as you saw the iron mixed with the baked clay, so the people will be a mixture and will not remain united. And more than iron mixes with clay. Now, this is the prophetic side that I was telling you about earlier. And this is what it means, that these kingdoms that this story is talking about, this dream that Nebuchadnezzar was scared about, is when it's coming true. So what is this really about? This is that prophetic side, and this is really powerful, that gold head, that was Nebuchadnezzar. That was all of Babylon. It was the top, and everything bowed down to you. You're the most powerful. But there's an end coming. And it's not going to be as powerful as you, but it's coming. It's the silver. It's just different parts. Now there was a couple of countries north and to the east of Babylon. Persia and the Medo area. And these two countries will come together and merge an army that will overtake Babylon. And this will happen in Daniel's time frame. This will happen in his life. He will see this coming. Now that silver will come, but they're not going to be as powerful. But they know it's there. Now the belly and thighs of bronze, they are referring to the Grecian Empire. All the writers agree with this. This is the Greeks that will rise up. Alexander the Great will be the leader. That's going to happen about 300 years later, that the Greeks are going to rise up and rule the world. And the next one, talked about the iron and the clay. They're referring to the Roman Empire. That's going to be about 600 years. About 600 years from the time of Daniel, the Romans will come in, and they eventually are going to break apart as a divided kingdom. But that rock that smashes all of these, is talking about the kingdom of God that is eternal. I love what happens in verse 44. It says, in the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. So in other words, no other rulers will rise up. It will crush over all the kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will itself endure forever. This is the meaning of the vision of the rock cut out of the mountain, but not by human hands. A rock that broke the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold into pieces. This great God has shown the king what will take place in the future. This dream is true, and its interpretation is trustworthy. And Nebuchadnezzar immediately bows down and begins to worship the capital G God of Daniel. Now, this is great, and this is kind of scary bedtime stories. I mean, you've got Nebuchadnezzar that's thinking that he understands that in his time frame, in his life, he's going to be overthrown. But at least he has relief. He knows the truth, and he begins to bow down and worship God. And this is great, but this really isn't a fun bedtime story. So what does this have to do with us? What does this have to do with us in 2018? I mean, that's great, and the Babylon is gone, and the Persians are gone, the Greeks, that's over, Rome, that fell. So why is that in the Bible, and what does that have to do with me in 2018? Here it is. God is active in your life. God is active in your life. That is a wonderful creation of His. As a wonderful creation of His, He is working divinely into your story. If you want Him to or not, He's weaving in and out with you. He's guiding you. I mean, even when our circumstances are not desirable, God has a plan and a purpose for His world and for His people. See, those little g gods, they're all about status. It's all about status. They're takers, they're users, they're liars, and manipulators. But capital G God revels in relationship. For whatever reason, I can't figure it out. The creator of the universe made us specifically to live in community with you and me. He wants to hang out with us. He knows how weird we are. He made us, and He loves us. And He wants to be with us. He wants to talk to us. He wants to hear about your day. In fact, when Daniel is saying that this interpretation is true and trustworthy, here's what I'm telling you. It's like he's saying to him that through all of this and through all of these kingdoms, God was still present. When Nebuchadnezzar, when you thought you were in charge, God was. When Alexander the Great is thinking he's in charge, God was. That when Rome believes they're going to conquer the world border to border, God's still in charge. He's still calling the shots. Our circumstances do not dictate our reality. Our circumstances do not dictate our reality. So there's an old Bible phrase that old-timers used to talk about, and it's talking about the providence of God or God's provident hand. It's the will of the Creator. This slide is here. It's the will of the Creator who is actively involved in moving His creation to a goal. That God's providence, His hand, is walking with you. He's walking with you. No matter how bad your circumstances may appear, God is in control. God's in control. I mean, Daniel's life hasn't changed. He's still a prisoner. He is still a eunuch. He is still in a foreign land, speaking a foreign language, singing foreign songs, working for a foreign king. He's still there. Nothing's changed in his circumstances. But that does not change his reality that capital G, God is still in control. For so many of us, we use our life as a barometer. When it's going good, then yay, God loves me. When it's going bad, boo, God hates me. He doesn't hate you. He's in charge. He's still guiding you. Your circumstances, where you're at, life is hard, it's difficult, it's mean, it's unfair. Things don't work out the way we want. It's not about that. He's still in charge. His providential hand is working before us and after us. He was telling Daniel about things that were going to happen in the next 60 years. He was telling Daniel about things that were going to happen in 300 years. He was telling Daniel about what's going to happen in 600 years. God has a plan. There is a plan. He did not create us just to run amok. He didn't just create us and say, good luck. I hope this works out. Holy cow, look at all you got to play with. I don't know. Whew. Some of those roses, though they're pretty, but they got thorns, don't touch them. That's not what it is. I mean, Psalm 19:1 says, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the skies proclaim the work of His hands. So our proclamations of God cannot be determined by our circumstances. The prophet Ezra said in Nehemiah chapter 9, verse 6, "You alone are the Lord. You made the heavens, even the highest heavens, and all their starry hosts, the earth and all that is in it, the seas and all that is in them. You give life to everything, and the multitudes of heaven worship you." The Apostle Paul said in Colossians 1:17, "He is before all things, and in him all things hold together." The author of Hebrews chapter 1 verse 3 said this, "The Son is the radiance of God's glory and the exact representation of his being, sustaining all things by his powerful word. And after he had provided purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the majesty in heaven." These passages are important because basically they're letting us know none of creation is self-sufficient. I don't care how smart you are. I don't care how wealthy you are, how poor you are, how gifted you have been given. You can see something, figure it out. You can solve it. There are a lot of people out there that can fix things. You're good. Nobody's doubting that. But you're not going to make it on your own. You're not going to make it. Because there's a providential hand of God that is leading you, guiding you, and directing you, even when you don't see it, and even when the circumstances are not what you want. Philippians 4:7 says this, "And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." When I told a group of young men this story Monday night, but when we first moved here, and my both children did it, but my daughter was where it started because she's older. She was 6 years older. That when I would come home to our house on Shaker Drive, that we had this bay window in the front, and my daughter would be looking out the side, and she would see us when I would pull in, and she would run from the bay window, and she would get to the top of the stairs, and we had the stairs that would go down to the front door. And then when I opened the door, I would walk up when we first got here, because she was little. I'd go up to like the second or third from the top, and I'd clap my hands. I'd say, "Let's go." And she would just run and jump. And I'd catch her. Now, I'm telling you, don't do this when you get home if your kid's like 16. It's not going to work. It hurts. Leaves terrible, bad. But when she was like 18 months old, man, she would jump. And as she got older, I would go up fewer steps. And I'd go, "Let's go." But when I was at the bottom and she was at the top, and she would stand there and clench her fist, and she would move her feet, she wanted to jump. She knew that I'd never dropped her before. She knew that I loved her. She knew all of those things. But see, I keep going back to this, that it's much easier to love somebody than to trust them. And no matter how much she loved, she knew that that would take absolute trust. That would take absolute trust for her to take off and go. And I would go, "Let's go. I got you. I got you." And finally, she had enough courage, enough of this, she launched. And I caught her. And we celebrated like it was a gold medal in the Olympics. Yeah, she was high-fiving. She was telling her grandparents. It was the day that she learned to fly. And see, there's this thing in our life, no matter our circumstances, God is sitting there going, "I know where you're at. Wherever it is, I know. I know. I know you're eating along. I know. I know that report totally stunk. I know that meeting that you had with that boss. I know. I know you don't know if you're going to figure it out. But here's what I need. I need you to jump. I need you to jump. I got you. I got you." And every time that we pat our feet and we clench our fists and we think, "I know I love you and you love me," I get that. I get it. But I am so afraid to jump. That this Creator God did not make us. He didn't make the mountains and the oceans to say, "Good luck." He said, "I'm in this because I love you. And jump to me. Trust me. Trust me." Now, Chris is going to come out and lead us in a song, and I'm going to ask you to stand with me. That today, today, I want to read this verse. In Jeremiah 17, it says this, "But blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence is in him. They will be like a tree planted in the water that sends out its roots by the stream. It does not fear when the heat comes. Its leaves are always green. It has no worries in a year of drought and never fails to bear fruit." Maybe today is the day you say, you know what, God, I have always had a loving relationship with you. I love you. You love me. I get that. But today's the day I want to start to trust you. In the midst of all my chaos, I want to trust you because I cannot carry this any longer. My life, the backpack of junk that I'm carrying is so stinking heavy, I cannot make it. But today is the day I choose to trust. Today is the day that I say, I trust you. I trust you with my yesterdays. I trust you with my today. And I'm going to trust you with my future because I cannot make it alone.